Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for Wednesday, March 25th, 2015. My name is Scott Bugby. To my right is Jim Lehan. To my left is Jeff Palumbo. To Jeff's left is Jack Hathaway, our town administrator. And to his left is Marion Harrington. We're also joined by the advisory board tonight for a joint budget discussion. I also must advise everyone this meeting will be audio and videotape, so if you wish to address the board, please grab a microphone. Jack, can you read our agenda?
I'd be happy to. 7 p.m. we have a joint budget discussion with the advisory board. 8 p.m. We have Common Core discussion related to the potential ballot question. Town administrator report, including appointing James Gersha to the Conservation Commission. I think that'll happen about 9 o'clock. Please consider allowing the Norfolk Lions to place a banner on Town Hill. Request from the Federated Church to use Town Hill on Easter Sunday. Request from the Garden Club to use Town Hill and the gazebo on May 16th for their annual perennial plant and bake sale. And a request from the Grange to hold their annual Clean and Green campaign. Please consider modifying the intermunicipal agreement with KP District and Franklin for the Regional Communications Center. And please consider modifying the mailbox policy that is, we actually probably will push that off until the next meeting, but they'll be presented by the DPW director. We also have discussion of the review of the warrant, and we do not have an executive session tonight.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well, if you guys will, the advisory board will just indulge me for a sec. I just wanted to move the appointment of Jim up of the Conservation Committee so we can, if he wants to leave. Do I have, if he wants to leave.
I
Motion?
move to appoint Jim Gersha to the Conservation Commission. It is a full term, Marion? Where'd Marion go? Marion, is it a full 3-year term?
We got plenty of openings, so it should
Conservation?
Conservation, full 3 year?
3-year? To a 3-year term. Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor?
With gratitude, I might add.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
You have votes, yes? Aye?
Aye.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we'll sign it. We'll sign it too. If you just get sworn in by Carol at the clerk whenever you have a chance.
Okay, come back.
So you can vote, yeah, any, tomorrow they're open or whenever.
Yeah, then if you call her, she can arrange to meet you at night or whatever.
It's
if you
quick.
can't come during the day.
Okay.
Just that way you can, then you can vote and obviously you can always attend the meetings, but that way
Okay,
you can
sounds
vote.
perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again,
Enjoy.
Jim. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.
Jim.
I appreciate that. It didn't take too long. Okay. No, Jack's just mean, yeah, but thank you. Okay. Jack, you want to, you ready for the budget? So you keep changing this. Is this the,
Yeah, we can get into the budget.
what's the good news?
Well, let me give you just a couple handouts. Not really that detailed, but just as a reminder, free cash certified $1,109,475. A lot of that we had 2 years of prison mitigation funds, as well as some FEMA money that came in that had to go into free cash before we could appropriate it. So the thought was, and what we really need to do is we need to use that prison mitigation funds at a minimum for capital. So that totaled $453,959. The remainder, $655,516, is available for the town to use, obviously at town meeting as they deem fit. We did use some money in the fall, so if you switch to page 2 there, the capital free cash, again, we had $453,959. We spent $50,500 at the fall town meeting. Some of that was on some fire equipment as well as boiler at the H. Olive Day School. So we have $403,000 left. The other free cash, the $655,000, again at the fall town meeting, we put $100,000 into the stabilization fund, and then $116,000 of, I don't have it in front of me, but those other transfers that we did. I think it was a whole list of items that we covered. So we're down to $439,466. the last page of that little handout here, and this is just kind of the beginning of the presentation I'll have for town meeting, but is the governor's budget this for state aid. So I do have one more. So school aid is going up from $3,312,000 up to $3,328,000. So a rise of $16,000. I think they cut that. Usually is $50 a student. This year it's only $25 a student that they're raising that aid. The charter school funding is really based on a formula based on number of students in Norfolk that are attending charter schools. And there's some sending, and there's both revenue and expenditures on the cherry sheet for that. So we're going up to $12,000, and that will actually change during the year as the population next year is finalized. Lottery money up from $853,000 to $884,000, so a rise of $29,000. All the exemptions, those are when we provide abatements through the Board of Assessors for blind, elderly, veterans. Those are the big three. For different property tax abatements, we get a partial reimbursement from the state on those, and so that's just money coming back to us, $62,000 next year. State-owned land, that's one of my favorite categories. The property that is owned by the state in town, most of that is the prison land. We receive $154,000. This isn't the prison mitigation money. This is actually the payment in lieu of taxes money. So it's a far-fetched from what the value of the property really would gather if we had residential property or commercial property on that land, but that's what we get. The assessments, that is all the county assessments and MBTA funding, going from $409,000 up to $443,000. That runs the Norfolk County Registry, any other county programs that, again, it's an assessment that we really can't control. The mosquito control program. So our net state aid goes from $3,976,000 up to $3,998,000, a whopping $22,000 increase. So I have the first kind of real true draft of the budget, and we'll, just for the people at home, we'll talk about revenues. We'll talk about the budget drivers on the expense side, employee benefits, other categories that we'll touch on a little bit: excluded debt, regular debt, the King Philip assessment. Then there's the line item budget, and then the two enterprise funds, and capital at the end. Although we won't. I'm not prepared to talk about that tonight, but we will talk about that coming up. So revenues, obviously, property taxes. The first thing we do is raise on the budget. We raise property taxes by 2.5%, as allowed under Prop 2.5. So that's an additional $622,000, almost $623,000. And then we make an estimate at this point for new growth. That's new growth that the assessors account for this spring and into the summer. We have, the last couple of years, well, I guess in 2014, we hit at least a recent peak of $650,895. 2013 was only $395,000, but I think we've seen some continued growth. We budgeted, actually, we have the actual number for this year at $631,000. So right now I've got it in at $650,000. One challenge that we have is with the new assessor. She's just started 2 weeks ago. That's obviously something she's got to get. And it's a reval year, so she's got a real fun year ahead of her. We make a provision for abatements. Right now, I have it at $150,000, but that's for, especially in a reval year, we get a lot of people coming in and challenging their tax assessment. So we have a reserve that then the assessors, when they agree that an abatement is appropriate, that's where that funding would come from for an abatement on their taxes.
Jack, do you want questions now or later?
Go right ahead.
How much is in the reserve now for abatements?
There's I don't have the number in front of me. There's a surplus of probably $20,000 to $30,000. When you look at the last 4 years, those are the ones that we carry. We'll look to have the assessors release some of that because there are a couple of cases that to go through the assessor's normal abatement process, they have to do it, like this February. It's going on right now for the current tax year. But when they go to land court, those can get stuck for a couple of years. So there's a couple that are, particularly the Walgreens is stuck in, still waiting for some resolution on that. So they keep that in reserve until those cases go away. But
So is there any potential for any release from them?
yeah, and I think there will be. Again, off the top of my head, I think it's somewhere between $10,000 and maybe $30,000.
Okay.
The next section of the revenues is all the local, what we call local receipts. Biggest one, obviously, being motor vehicle excise tax. I have that estimated at $1.6 million. The 2014 actual number was $1,525,000, and looking at the current year's receipts, I think we're going to beat that a little bit this year. So I'm counting on you all going out and buying new cars. I haven't made a lot of changes to the rest of the receipts. A little bit on licenses and permits. I did, you can see that the building license and permits is predominantly monopolized by the building department. The building permits, gas, electrical, and we peaked at 457 in 2014. I don't think we're going to get up to that number again. Big number there was the medical building. So we can get some more commercial development. We can bring that number up some, but Bob thinks we'll be in the $310,000 range for next year. We've got a late start, obviously, in the building season this year, but good news is hopefully some of that will slide into next budget year. One of the other big numbers there is the $280,000, about 3 lines above the orange line there. That's the ambulance receipts. So we collect ambulance revenue from the insurance companies as people are transported on the ambulance. And we appropriate most of that money. So this is projected revenue for next year. We try to appropriate most of that money into the budget. That's been our history, and then we keep a little bit in reserve so that we don't end up with a deficit. So we've got a little bit of money in that process that we can use to purchase an ambulance. I think we've got, Julie estimates that we'll be somewhere around $125,000 at the end of this year that we could use to purchase an ambulance. But for next year, we think it would be appropriate to take, again, $280,000. Miscellaneous receipts, again, looking at 2014, we had another big year there. And that, again, was the double income on the prison mitigation funds. And then we had that FEMA money. So we usually manage to somehow collect about $200,000. So right now I have it at $220,000. And generally that's non-recurring money. It's just coming from a variety of different sources. We talked about the state aid already. Those numbers are listed there. Again, we're getting about $22,000 in extra money. Down the bottom section in the white, I have other sources, and that's where we take money out of available funds that we have. Right now, to try and get this budget to balance, I've taken $350,000 of free cash. We can certainly have a discussion about whether or not that's appropriate. I don't like to use one-time sources of money to support the operating budget, but I'm not sure how we're going to get to this budget unless we take a little bit of one-time money. So, including the $350,000 from free cash, we have $1.6 million of extra revenue this year than we do next year than we do this year.
Yeah, on the medical building, is that in the, which year is that in the new growth number? Is it
That's
in
probably more,
It's in both. It's in both.
probably gets picked up more in the 2015 if I'm,
Okay,
There was some in 15, and I think the bulk of it came in 16.
14, 15.
Yeah, because it was kind of prorated because they didn't have all floors. completed.
yeah, so it wouldn't have been
2
100%
years.
last summer, so they'll pick up some more new growth this summer. Right, when they got partial occupancy over the winter.
I was just wondering if that's skewing your new growth number. Like, are we being optimistic for 16 because that's in the prior years?
I hope not.
We've had really good new growth.
Right.
And we've got the whole Pulte subdivision still
that
going.
That's true.
That
yeah.
number should be pretty good.
Yeah.
Still a few subdivisions, and there's still a few subdivisions that are teed up. And we've got some 40Bs that are coming. They probably won't be in the next coming year, but got some good discussions to go there. So going to the next page, the budget summary, blue, yellow, pink, and orange page. I try to just group expenses into major categories. The blue being the revenues that we've already talked about, but just kind of summarizes there where that money is coming from. I know at some point Dave's going to find a number that doesn't match the same number on a different page, but when you do, just let me know. Fixed costs in the yellow section. So those are, fixed costs is probably not the right term, but it's really numbers that at this point we don't have too much control over. So debt service is obviously money that we can't control at this point. We're committed to debt, and this is non-excluded debt, so it's debt that we pay for out of the operating budget. That'll increase by $22,000. We'll talk about that in more detail later. Health insurance, right now we think our premium has been pegged at going up at 10.3%. We're hoping to have some negotiations to bring that number down some, and potentially whether that just be through negotiations with Maya or with negotiations that involve the unions allowing us to make changes to the plan design, so taking on some more employee costs on the co-pays, et cetera, that will allow us to bring that premium down by at least a couple of percent would be good. The Norfolk County retirement, again, that's an assessment at this point, a $223,000 increase, and I think we're going to see that same number over the next, or that same percentage over the next couple of years. They've already given us that warning. Unemployment benefits, at this point, we are doing much better than we did back in 2014. We haven't had a lot of layoffs, so that's been good. We pay on an actual basis, so when somebody is unemployed, we pay the real dollar cost. And I've learned more about unemployment than I ever want to know with just the way the municipalities work. And if somebody leaves a job here and then is unemployed at their next job, we get hit with an assessment. All kinds of crazy stories, but that's one of them. Some other employee benefit costs, Medicare, up 6%, $6,000, 3%. Our building and liability insurance, we don't have that locked in yet, but we know that there's going to be a little bit of an increase, so I have that going from $300,000 to $325,000. Tri-County has a budget meeting tomorrow morning to talk about their budget, but they've given us a number of $633,000 I think the good news is we have some student population drop there, so we're only seeing an increase of 1%. Norfolk Agricultural School, they've been increasing their assessment, so I think they're up to $2,100 per student now. So it's going up. So and we've picked up some more students, so we're up to 16,800. The transfer station expense, which has an offsetting revenue component to that, we estimate that to be at $389,000 right now. And down at the bottom there, the shared services, $406,000. That's the big component of that is the fuel for the different departmental cars. Seeing that going from $380,000 up to $406,000. Down on the bottom is the discretionary, what I call the discretionary costs. So it's general government, the elementary school, public safety, King Philip. You can see there's still some numbers there. Norfolk Elementary estimating their budget at 4.3%. That's from their school committee, so that's $448,000. General government, which is town hall, library, senior center, an increase of $149,000. We'll talk about the components of that in a little bit. Public safety, $268,000, or 6.2%. Public Works, 76,000. And the King Philip operating budget, right now, they are looking at a $499,000 increase, or 6.84% on our assessment, which is a lower number on their budget, because they have four components of their revenue, which is the 3 town assessments, and then the state aid, which is a much lower percentage increase. And then culture and recreation, which is the library, and a couple other small departments, $29,000 increase. So we can go, at this point, if you want to go into more detail, we can. Or you can all kind of digest it and we can talk about it some more.
Just a quick question on the shared services. The
Yep.
bulk of that, you said, was fuel costs? Gasoline, I presume, diesel?
Gasoline and diesel.
Those prices have generally been down a bit this year.
Yeah. If you go to, well, I don't have a page number on there. So if you go to the shared service section of the line item, so we have a new big component of that part of the budget, and it's snow and ice. So that's become the number one. So we've increased that by 25,000, which is a big chunk of the biggest chunk of that increase.
Okay.
And we're gonna.
Thanks.
So
Yeah.
so you're right. So we're,
That makes sense.
and we're going to continue to the plan, at least by the selectmen. Executive Order number 72, I think, was to increase the snow and ice budget $25,000 a year until we get to a reasonable place. We're still not at a reasonable place. I do have the, I hope. Yeah. In your budget, in your packet there is this debt page. First part being the non-exempt debt, so that's the debt that we're paying for out of the operating budget. So non-exempt, for a couple of the new people, non-exempt debt is money that we've been authorized to borrow at town meeting, but to pay for within the operating budget. The next section is the exempt debt, which we appropriate at town meeting, but then we also have a ballot question that asks the town to vote whether or not they want to pay for this above and beyond the limitations of Proposition 2.5. So those, at this point, are The exempt debt is the library construction, and then the Freeman Kennedy School construction. In addition to that, we also have the King Philip debt, which is not displayed on this page. But the general fund exempt, non-exempt debt is, for next year is $533,000. We also have $12,000 in the line item of the budget that covers any issuance costs that we pay if we were to issue new debt. So that gets us to the $545,000. The yellow section there is just so you know that we know the numbers for some recent debt that we've borrowed, and those were from last year's town meetings. The road program, the almost $300,000 that we borrowed, the sprinklers, the vehicles. Next line being the land acquisition for the Sharon Ave property. We're paying the interest on those borrowings in 2016. When we turn that into long-term debt, there will be a debt schedule on those. So I highlight that for you so that you know at some point we're going to add more numbers to those that debt service. Other than that, you can see that the debt within the budget is going down over the next, particularly in 2019. That number goes from 533 now to down to $247,000. And my thought is, and the Public Safety Building Committee's thought is, that the land acquisition number, we would actually roll that into with the construction funds for the police and fire construction projects, and then have that roll into the exempt debt should the town approve that. Down the bottom of the page, obviously, is, as it's labeled, is the water debt. So, I guess the big picture is, even with the $350,000 coming from free cash, I've got a $549,000 budget deficit, with an overall budget of $34 million. So I still have to make some cuts within the budget in order to balance it, or find some new revenue, which I think is unlikely at this point. I hope the state aid will come up some, but certainly won't. I would be shocked if it closed that deficit, but we should hear from the House and the Senate over the next month, and I'll work with the other department heads and try and close that deficit. I think you've got the police chief and the fire chief coming in next week?
And Bob,
And Bob.
DPW.
Bullock? Oh, Bob McGee.
Yeah.
I actually won't be here, but I know they don't need me here, but I know Mr. Lehan has also volunteered to come, and if any of the other selectmen will come
When is the meeting?
next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday at 6:30.
6:30.
Is KP coming too, schools?
Schools are the
No,
following.
schools on.
Schools are on the 8th.
Okay.
There's a question, the water debt, 14,000 for vehicles in 2016? Did I miss an acquisition of a vehicle, my favorite topic?
We bought a pickup truck. Yeah, the pickup truck with the F-350
Okay,
pickup truck
okay.
for the water department. We bought 3 for the DPW at that same time period. It was basically for the 3 foremen.
Okay, and did we borrow? Did they borrow for
did.
that?
Based on your recommendation.
Right, okay. Thank you.
So the meeting with public safety is on April 8th?
No,
Or
April
next
1st.
April
So it is
1st.
next Wednesday?
School is
Yes.
April 8th.
Yeah,
Next
schools are
Wednesday is
in
April 8th.
I'm planning on attending both of those. If anyone else is, we should post it.
Yeah, I can't attend on the 8th, but I can attend.
Post it, Marion, I guess.
I think when I've talked about this budget before, one piece of misinformation I had was people asked about adds to staff, et cetera. Right now, I've got $12,000 in there for to get our IT director another part-time person for half a year. He's got, right now, the town pays for half the IT director's salary, and then he spends theoretically half of his time over at the elementary school. He's got two other IT people at the school fund, so they have 2.5 people. We just have a half a person, and Michael's doing an outstanding job, but he's, particularly with all the public safety, different technologies, he spends a lot of time. So we're trying to get him another, really, half a body, just to help him do computer upgrades and problem solving. So I didn't want you to think and then in the fire department, we funded for a half a year the daytime firefighter last year. So we're just picking up the second half, the full year carry of the firefighter. So I think last time I met with you, the advisory board, I told you that there weren't any ads. So I'm going to fess up to those.
Is the IT a contractor, Jack, or do you actually, they come on as a part-time employee?
He can, I think with the kind of his school, the school's very good at hiring .2s, .4s
Yeah.
people, so we'd probably hire a 19-hour person.
Right.
Or a 10-hour, depending on what he can
Yeah.
afford, a 10-hour person, so. Somebody without benefits. One thing that, well, the advisory board is here too, just on the warrant, there are some, what's that? Oh. Oh, good. We've got updated warrants here, and these have comments from town council already incorporated in them, so there's some changes from last meeting. But if we can cut to the end, KP submitted 2 articles. And embarrassingly, I didn't have the capital article on the warrant, so I have that on there now. But KP submitted 2 articles, and one of them is to amend the King Philip Regional School District agreement. So this is with the 3 towns, and that's Article O, which is on page 14. What's that?
In.
It's the second O.
Yes.
Oh, dear. It's the first O.
Section.
I'm much better with numbers than I am with letters.
I think it's your first O, Jack.
Maybe the letter R, Jack, after Q.
Oh, no R. Okay.
Yeah, we give them the alphabet. So maybe an S.
All right, so it's at the bottom of page 14, and what they're trying to do is something we've talked about for a number of years, is just to push back the date of when they deliver the first budget. They deliver it on Valentine's Day, February 14th now, and so their King Philip School Committee voted to request the towns to change that to March 15th, which kind of brings up my second point is I'm not sure if that now may have us kind of think of that, what we've thought about the last couple of years is pushing back our budget part of town meeting. Because if we're at March 15th, which is last week, and that's the first time we're getting the King Philip budget, I don't know, we may or may not want to think about doing what the other two towns do and have the budget part of town meeting in like the first week in June. I don't know, just something to think about. We don't have to, something we could probably decide in the fall or even next spring if we wanted to. But, you know, for me, just constructing the budget with the King Philip, the size of the King Philip budget and it just really changes the whole aspect of the budget. And if I want to get it in on March 15th,
A more realistic budget when it comes in a little later, that was
Right.
the problem.
Yeah.
It's coming in.
so I think it's better.
And that, right, that was the whole,
Yeah.
I can't remember, did you go with me to that meeting, or
I
Scott,
was,
you were
you
there?
were
Okay.
there. That was the hope, but they still,
Yeah.
it's still a moving target a little bit with special ed. It's mainly the biggest moving
So
target.
we would support this moving their budget to the March 15th, we just have to
Yes.
talk about.
Yes,
Right.
I would think,
Deal
we-
with it
yeah.
Yeah,
in
Yes.
town meeting.
yeah. I mean, this is, you know, I'm probably a little bit later than the last couple of years, but for getting this budget put together, but if we adopt this and, you know, so next year I'll be even a little bit behind where I am today. So, just something to think about. The other article that they submitted is not a request for money, but just the ability to spend their money on a capital project that they have at the middle school, which is a repair of their their internal sewer system. So they're looking to spend $200,000, of which $50,000 would be quote-unquote Norfolk's money, Norfolk's share of that. I still don't agree that they have to ask us permission to spend their own money, but they think they
This
do.
is, right, their council, this is their council that's, yes.
Wise counsel told them.
And then on, there is our wise town council advised us to strike an article that, it's about the tax title. It's the article that we, you know, it's really kind of one of our boilerplate ones, and I've got it stricken out. It's on page 5, Article A. It's the one that asks for authority for the Board of Selectmen to sell tax title, land that's been acquired by tax title. Copeland and Page has advised us that by state law now, we have the authority to do that already, so we don't need to ask for authority to do that. Really, the tax title custodian has the authority to do it, which is our treasurer-collector. And that's who has always actually sold the property for us when we do sell it, so they wanted to make sure that the selectmen weren't trying to take that authority away from the tax title custodian. I advised them that you weren't. You don't want to hold the auctions, I assume.
No.
So we'll remove that one from the warrant. If you are okay with those 3 articles at the end, one is the capital, and then the 2 King Philip ones, I just ask that you open and then close the warrant as a matter of procedure to pull these articles in.
Do I have a motion to open the warrant?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we'll include those. Do I have a motion to close the warrant?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All set, Jeff.
Thank you. Any other questions about the budget, or?
Jack, I have one. The detail on the library, I'm just curious why the salaries are up 7%. Are they adding staff or hours?
Julie went through that for me with Robin. My understanding, and then she came back to me, my understanding was there was one case where they were adding a few hours, but they were actually losing, they're gonna be losing somebody. So overall, they're not adding many more hours. But they've got, the 53rd, we've got a 53rd week next year that we're trying to budget for. You know, we kind of, for any of you that do silly budgeting, we kind of lose a couple of days every year because we do 52 weeks, and then all of a sudden we have to gain 53. So it's really the bigger impact on them is they're trying to get to the.
I mean, it's
cover
not,
that
it's a
50 every-
7% increase, it's not a lot, I was just, 'cause
Yeah, no,
almost all
that
the
raised
contracts
my-
are at 4%, I was just curious how that one was at 7.
I think that one person I talked about, they've got that person covering a lot when they have opening, when they have vacations, et cetera, and they needed to fund that one person a little bit more. It's only a couple $1,000 bucks.
So that's municipal government's version of leap year, I guess.
It is, yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
Question on the capital allocation process. Is there a capital committee? There have been some requests. How's that?
No.
There's an article to get rid of the capital committee.
Which is fantastic. I think it's long overdue, but just in terms of OP and Q this year, the capital articles, how?
We're just going to do it at the local board level with the department heads and make the recommendations. We don't have any members on the capital outlay committee at this point.
Oh, right, I think the process has become a little anachronistic, but, should we hear of a capital request, that we should direct it to the selectmen? Is that the idea, if someone asks us out?
Yeah.
Joe
Yeah, I
or to
think
Jack?
the
Ideally, Jack, start with Jack.
at your meeting next week, I think those three department heads will be prepared to talk about
Their
some potential capital. I think the big one is an ambulance. DPW has a couple of needs, mostly vehicles that they want to talk about, and then the standard police car.
But in terms of process, those requests go to you if they're not.
Yeah,
organized.
I'll after the department heads and I will summarize it for you, and it'll come through, and we'll go to directly to the two boards here.
Good. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, kind of at where we are, and like you said, this is really like your first chance to really put everything together, what's been requested. Just conceptually at a high level, do you view it as this is a level service, or individual departments have added a few things that they'd like to see accomplished in the coming year that maybe weren't funded in a previous year? Because it seems like our expenses are going up at a much greater rate than they have the last couple of years.
Yeah, I want to, it's supposed to be a level service, so I'm still kind of doing my own kind of investigation on that. As I said, the only two areas where there's adds to staff are those two that I talked
Yep.
about. I think on the 13th of April with the selectmen, I'm looking to come to them have a balanced budget at that point.
Okay.
And bring maybe if there are some things that are creeping
Right.
into the budget,
Okay.
take them out.
And on the 15th, would you be available to do, yeah, because that'll be our last one where we'll try and wrap everything up, so that'll be a good flow. All right.
I think really the only major changes, that halftime, the 13th firefighter is 26 grand.
Right, so
Which is half a
both,
year.
both of the headcount related ones are relatively small numbers in the scheme of 30 million bucks, so.
I've met with
yeah.
both schools.
Yeah,
King Philip, that's their start number.
right.
So.
Right, yes.
I think I'm confident in saying that it'll get whittled a little bit. How much
Yes,
remains to be seen.
I would agree with you.
That's the
I
high
went
end.
to their budget presentation, yeah.
The elementary school, the only real two items that they're asking for are the elimination of the bus fees and the elimination of the full-time kindergarten fees, which, just speaking for me, I could not support more.
Yeah.
Total support of that, long overdue. Other than that, they're pretty level as well, so.
Right. Although,
So it's no more pay to ride then?
I'm sorry?
Right.
So you don't have to pay for the bus anymore?
If in next year.
If
yeah,
this budget passes, they're recommending eliminating the busing fee and the full-day kindergarten fee.
yeah.
I'm sorry?
Right. And full-time kindergarten would be no, yeah.
I suspect the kindergarten one, without seeing the details yet, I know Ingrid sent it and we're meeting with them in a couple of weeks, but that's got to be a fairly expensive proposition.
Yeah, well, she's
So-
here, so it's the
yeah.
bulk, it's the bulk of their increase.
That's what I would suspect.
Yeah.
'Cause,
The rest is
yeah,
just salaries, just
Yes.
contract stuff.
Right.
I think if I look at the expense side, unfortunately, for the upcoming fiscal year, I agree with your observation, so it's basically level services, and sometimes there's some things that can be helpful and perhaps achieve some savings for a particular line item, or perhaps a few line items, but if you look at this budget, there's no line items that are moving in the other direction. I mean, they're all moving
Yeah.
up, which you would certainly expect most all of them would, but they're all moving up, or there's some that are basically flat year on year, so.
The one that's really killing us, and I think is going to kill us for some period of time, is the county retirement system.
15%.
It is just, I mean, a $250,000 increase. It's just ridiculous, and it's forecasted to be that now for several years. You add that to, we've been running less on our health insurance. We had one year where I think we were at 2 or 3%, Jack, weren't we?
Yeah.
And so, now we're at 8.5. You take those two items, if you cut that 8.5 to 4, 8, that's 300,000 of the gap right there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's about 60% of our problem.
Was there a sunset on that retirement increase? Was it just, they were going to increase it?
A sunset, only when we're all
That was
gone.
three-
I think will be the
The
sunset.
recollection was 3 years, and this is the first of the
Okay.
Yeah.
big three.
And that was to make up for the loss?
They're recovering, I guess is the best way to say it. Yeah. And we all have to pay our fair share.
Just a couple of notes. The Municipal Finance Department, we've got an increase there because we're replacing both the town accountant and the assistant town accountant are retiring next winter. And I'm still trying to figure out how to staff that right. I've had some discussions already with a candidate who I have a long history with. So we're trying to work that out. But I've got some overlap in the budget there because it's such a critical position. I want to actually have that person come in before I lose both my accountant and town accountant. It'd be one thing if I was losing one, but I'm losing both almost at the same time. So, and then in the Board of Assessors, there's a big spike there, the $27,000. Well, it's only a $13,000 increase, but just because this is a reval year. I need to look at that number, and that may need to actually go up a little bit more based on some discussions with Lorraine, our new chief assessor, just because we've got to bring some services in to help get the reval ready. So we have to look at every single piece of property in town and be able to justify all those to the Department of Revenue this year. So she's under a real time crunch there. So that's usually a number that spikes up every third year. You want to do a couple other action items before?
Is there no more questions on the budget for you? Thank you. Appreciate you guys coming. Yeah, we have like 10 minutes.
Always good to see you. See you guys next Wednesday.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Wednesday?
Thank you, thanks for
Thank
coming.
you, guys. Thank you, Lisa. Hope you feel better.
All right.
Nice
you
to
don't
see you,
wanna
Arlie.
Sure you don't want to stay?
Oh, thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. All right, Jack, what can we knock off here? Want to do the,
Yeah, the action items?
yeah, let's do the action items, yeah.
So we've got a request from the Norfolk Lions to place a banner on Town Hill from May 9th to May 23rd to advertise their Field of Flags. I don't know if you call that a display.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great idea. Good.
I had sent out some correspondence to you a couple of weeks ago, but the Norfolk Federated Church is asking to use the gazebo on Town Hill for their Easter sunrise service on Sunday, April 5th. It's an annual request that, actually, they usually do it at the cemetery, but would like to do it on Town Hill this year.
Motion.
I'll make that motion.
I'll recuse because I'm a member of the church.
I'll second that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Please vote to allow the Garden Club to use Town Hill and gazebo for their annual perennial plant and bake sale on Saturday, May 16th from 8 a.m. to 12:30 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Please vote to allow the Norfolk Grange to hold their annual Clean and Green campaign on Saturday, April 25th, 2015.
That's the trash roadside
Yep.
pickup. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Good job, Jack.
I guess the last one that I could talk about real quickly is ask that you extend the intermunicipal agreement with the three other towns, that's Rentham, Plainville, and Franklin. The IMA provides an initial term which expires on June 30th, 2020. We are asking to extend that to June 30th, 2040, and the reason for that extension is so that we can enter a long-term, so that the Regional Dispatch Center can enter into a long-term lease agreement with the town of Norfolk for renting the property. So that intermunicipal agreement where we agree to run the Regional Dispatch Center is something that we signed maybe 2 years ago now.
2 or 3, yeah.
Yeah, that was set to expire in 2020, but we just came to the conclusion, mostly because of the lease, but also as we get into contracts we assume that the dispatchers are going to unionize. There are going to be some other contracts that won't be one of them, but there will be some contracts that will enter that we'd want to have go beyond 2020.
Yeah. Has Nutty gotten back to us after you and I met with him on the contract, on the lease?
We've had some discussions. What we are at this point, tomorrow we open up the responses for our architect, and so, and then our Public Safety Building Committee will meet
We're meeting on Wednesday, next week?
30th. Yeah,
Tuesday?
I think it's Tuesday night. Is that right? To review those.
I know it's next week.
And the reason I bring that up is because when we started talking about the lease, we got into some confusing conversations about shared space and how
Tuesday.
how the lease was going to, some of the components of the lease would how we would put that together. So we want to have the architect on board so that we can start figuring out the space for both the dispatch and for the police, so that we can figure out what shared space there will be, what utilities will be shared, what won't be, what the generator, if that will be shared, so we can bring those all into the lease. But I think I think the overall, the foundation of the lease, I think we're okay with. But I think we just wanted to get that shared space and some of that other, the components of the building ironed out before we finalize the lease.
And the amount, the lease terms, you get that's pretty set too, in terms of payment, not when, but how much.
Yeah, I think,
We were at
so
$10
we
or
authorized Jim and, you authorized Jim and me to meet with Jeff Nutting from the, he was representing the rec to have some discussions. I think once we get some of those questions answered, then Jeff and I and Jim will meet again and then come back to you guys to see if you are okay with the terms.
Our first meeting was very positive. There were,
Yeah, I think-
there aren't any major issues on the table.
No, and I think,
Just some things to work out,
Yeah,
but nothing.
and the other board members, which are all the town administrators, are all, you know, they want to make sure that Norfolk is treated fairly and that, you know, they don't want us to gouge them, they don't want to gouge us. So I'm confident that we'll come to a reasonable agreement.
Okay. Now, do you want us to do that tonight, Jack, too, or do
I'd
you?
like to extend the intermunicipal agreement until June 30th, 2040.
So moved.
Yeah, just a point of discussion, do we make it contingent upon the extension by the other 3 towns? So we extend contingent
I
upon
think
the
by
extension.
definition, it would be contingent upon that, so.
If they don't, I think our vote
You
becomes
can, but I
moot.
think it'll be
Moot if they don't,
moot
if they don't.
if the
vote
other
for
ones
it.
don't.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. As you mean, like, it won't happen if they don't. do it. Yeah,
I'm
but-
not expecting a problem.
And there are ways for us to get out of the agreement, you know, within the entire agreement, there's, you know, so we don't have to be in it until 2040 if we don't, but we have to have a reason to get out.
There's seats up front. No one wants to sit up front. It's like school all over again. No one sits up front.
Or church.
A church, yeah, church or school. Yeah. It's great, yeah. Most crowd we ever had. Time we got now.
Yeah, the only thing about the mailbox policy that, you know, I think Bob wanted, I want to have the discussion with him here, just for the flavor of what he's looking for is just to put an end date into the policy. He doesn't want, you know, last summer, I think there were a couple times where people were coming in July and August, asking for funds. And so he'd rather just put something like an April 1st deadline into the, you know.
May 1st.
The snow might not be melted right now, yeah.
I still remember the April 1st snowstorm.
It might be better putting it, so that's of the whole policy in the jacket, really, basically, that's the only change you want to do? I think May 1st is
Yeah,
probably
I'm
safer
okay.
to give it, yeah.
Do you want to bring them all in for
No, I'm-
that? I
I'm
mean,
with you.
if that's the only change, do you want to bring them in just for that? I mean, I'm certainly okay with May 1st.
Okay, why don't you do that?
Okay. Till May 1st?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we need to vote that?
I will move to amend the mailbox policy to end in a fiscal year, appropriate fiscal year as of May 1st for reimbursement.
That request would need to be submitted.
Request needs to be submitted by May 1st. Okay, all's in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so amended. There you go, Bob. Stay home. Okay. 7:59, I think we can move to our 8 PM. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming. As you know, last selectment meeting, we had Patrick Toohey give us some thoughts and his feelings and concerns about the Common Core. So tonight, Jack was kind enough to reach out to the KP and Norfolk School administrators so they can give us some insight on what they've heard, what, you know, issues, anything like that. Because I also just want to clarify for people here tonight in the crowd and at home, the discussion is going to be centered around whether we put it on the, if it's appropriate to put on the ballot, not the pros and cons of Common Core versus Park or MCAS at all. Again, because we have to decide tonight whether we put it on the ballot. So we're looking to hear from, you know, folks in the schools if there's been concerns brought to their attention. So if you'd like to join us up here, ladies, it'd be great. A microphone would be bad, that way you don't have to have a handheld.
Hi, Ingrid, how are you? Good. Hi, Susan, how are you?
Thank you both
Good
for
to see you.
coming. We really appreciate that.
Wow, you brought handouts.
I just pressed, yeah, a few, just in case you want.
Speed read.
So we were asked just to come tonight to present some background information on the Common Core and the park assessments. And I think what we'll do is take each item separately because they're really two separate issues. In terms of the Common Core, just some background history. Massachusetts, way back in 1993, was one of the first states across the country to develop learning standards and frameworks, and for the Board of Education to adopt that. The goal behind that being that we wanted to have a clearly articulated set of expectations for what students should know and be able to do at each grade level, and that expectation was consistent across the state, whether you went to school in Boston, whether you were in Braintree, Norfolk, wherever you were. So there were common expectations. So Massachusetts really led the way in the development of common learning standards. When those standards were first adopted, the intent was, like any good curriculum cycle, that there'd be a constant process of reviewing and updating and revising those standards and assessing our performance against them. So back in 2009, those state standards were currently under revision, and the Governors Association decided to participate in the Common Core project. The intent of that was to revise the standards. There are some areas that the Mass state frameworks fell short in, and that the Common Core has addressed. I think it's really important for the public to note that the intent of any standards document is to define the minimum core competencies we expect students to know. They have always been intended as the floor and never intended as the ceiling for what we expect of our students. So I think that's an important point. And just as an example, within Norfolk, and I'm just speaking to the elementary level, and Susan will speak a little to the middle school and high school level, but any standard that we are teaching, teachers in the classroom look at the standard, they look at the skills and instructional needs of the students, and that standard is differentiated. So if we have a child coming into first grade that's reading at a third grade level, our expectation is that they're reading at their instructional level at third grade, and that's the kind of print material and text they're working on. So teachers differentiate within the classroom. You may have a standard, and for example, one of the first grade standards is that students will be able to add and subtract fluently with numbers less than 20. So what that might look like in the classroom, you might have a small group of students working with the teacher. They may be using math manipulatives, counters, and solving basic arithmetic problems. You might have another group of students that are working with more complex word problems, that are not using manipulatives, that are using traditional algorithms. You might have students writing their own word problems. So any standard looks very different in terms of how it's implemented instructionally in the classroom. And the standards also do not they do not define the curriculum or instructional practices. They define the minimum core competencies. Some of the shifts that you see in the Common Core, and I think Susan can talk to this too, there is a much greater emphasis in the Common Core standards on nonfiction reading and writing across the curriculum. I think that's very appropriate for our students. There's still a lot of classic literature that they're exposed to. They do a lot of narrative writing, but we know that our students are going to be expected to be able to demonstrate their knowledge in science and in social studies fluently in writing, and that's a big shift in the Common Core. There's a lot more focus on that. And critical reading of nonfiction text, which we know is a demand for the workplace and for college and career success. The Common Core standards were very heavily influenced by the current Mass frameworks in the process. When they were in the first iteration of them, the Board of Ed did reject the standards because they weren't closely aligned enough to the Massachusetts expectations. And then they were revised and resubmitted. In the resubmission, states were also given the discretion to add up to 15% of their own standards. So Massachusetts did choose to do that and customize. So over 20 standards were added to the ELA document. An equal number of math standards were added. The standards were then released for public comment. They were sent out for public comment, feedback solicited from educators, from parents, surveys were sent out by the Department of Ed, and they were adopted actually back in 2010 in a public meeting by the Board of Education. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah,
and
one of
talk
the
further
things
about
that I can say too, in terms of as the Massachusetts frameworks were developed, there also was a panel that looked at composed of educators, principals, and I actually what I did was we put together a packet if people are interested, which shows the body of people that were behind the Common Core as it underwent its processes. Then, as Massachusetts looked at redesigning the standards or upgrading the standards, as Dr. O'Lardy mentioned, there was that process where they had a whole team of educators and a panel from around the state. I have that for you here. They took a look at the standards, the Common Core standards. They took a look at prior Massachusetts standards, and then they looked at what they felt the needs of our students were. More standards were added in addition to what was reflected by the Common Core. What King Philip, what we decided to do at King Philip was we took our curriculum design and we looked at it from a rigorous curriculum perspective. So it's not that you're saying, okay, well, this is what somebody's teaching here, so we're just going to box it up and we're going to teach it that way at King Philip or in the Norfolk Public School System. So, what we really looked at is we went through a process for unpacking each standard and really trying to look at ways to make it rigorous for every discipline, for every grade level. A rigorous curriculum should have a detailed roadmap, and it should be have matching assessments, engaging learning experiences, and also diversity in instructional strategies so that you reach every student across the board. One of the other things that we've done is we've publicized our entire curriculum is public. It's viewable, through our King Philip website. People can find out information about what we're teaching. One of the things that I think that, we are aware that there is this ongoing debate, about different elements of Common Core. I think one of the things that we've tried to do is listen to people who are of the different groups with regards to that, or have different opinions with regards to that. And I think that, we've also tried to keep abreast of the pros, but we've also tried to keep abreast of the cons at the same time. One of the things that we have attempted to do, one of the common themes is that, there was that need for more nonfiction embedded in the curriculum. And so, consequently, there's that thought, well, gee, if you're adding more in, you've got to take something out. And so, what I will tell you is our English department has really attempted to preserve every element of the classics. We still include, and I think you'll find that reflected on our website, we've got Romeo and Juliet. We incorporate A Tale of Two Cities, To Kill a Mockingbird. We do The Odyssey. We do A Midsummer Night's Dream. We do Adventures of Huck Finn. And what our English teachers have looked at is how do you look at nonfiction elements and how to use that to draw forth some of the themes that are in the classic literature. And another thing that Dr. Alardi mentioned was, the frameworks or the standards. It's a minimum, it's a floor level. It's not meant to be a ceiling. I think that what we try to do with our approach towards curriculum design, and what you'll see too on our website is you'll see the units mapped out per subject area in terms of a timeline, whatever. But, we are looking ahead towards, we're hoping for the first time next year that we'll be able to have a class that takes Calculus BC, which is a step up beyond Calculus AB. That will be dependent on, it'll be dependent on enrollment, it'll be dependent on staffing, budget, and all of those things as we look ahead. So we are looking ahead to push the math curriculum. We're looking ahead to push the English curriculum as well.
Yeah, in keeping with that, too, at the elementary level, we have adopted several years ago a formal curriculum review cycle. So outside of the standards, we do look at every curriculum area thoroughly once every 5 years, and that's also a very public process. So we're in the process of looking at our English language arts curriculum right now. We look at student achievement data. We also have sent surveys out to collect feedback from parents in terms of how well prepared they feel their students are. We've done a lot of work with teachers around, again, taking the standards, making them rigorous, adopting instructional practices that challenge and promote critical thinking among our students. But it is a very public process as well in terms of curriculum. We just got survey data back from almost 200 parents in terms of feedback around the English language arts curriculum. That's then taken by the curriculum committees that are comprised of teachers across the grade levels, reading specialists, special education staff, and the curriculum is revised and updated accordingly.
Sorry, Doctor, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
So based on that survey, that's kind of information, whether general theme or concerns, I mean, how would you characterize the Or you have some you have some data there, okay.
Yeah, I have the data from the survey. I mean, overall, we get very positive feedback from parents about the curriculum, about the way that we tailor instruction to meet students' needs. We have some questions about assistive technology that have come out of the survey. I'm happy to share the results, but we look at those and then we respond to those in the development and in our curriculum work. We did a social studies review a year ago. Parents were looking for more information about the economic strand, and so we've looked at how to build that into the curriculum. So there, we do respond to that parent feedback. In terms of the Park versus MCAS, which is sort of a separate issue, did you have more that you wanted to say about the curriculum standards? Or?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
In terms of Park versus MCAS, the current MCAS tests are 17 years old. There are some significant limitations. So I think there's pretty much consensus across the state that we need to do something different. I'm not saying that needs to be Park. It could be a revised MCAS that we modify. But some of the issues that we have with MCAS is, first of all, it's a paper and pencil test. Our students take the math component of that test in the ELA component in March and then the math component in May. We do not get scores back from the Department of Ed until August, and they're embargoed, so we have a response period where we can look and make sure there's no errors in the data, and they're not released until September or October. So there's a 6-month lag from the time students take the test to the time we actually get usable data that we can release to parents and to teachers. That doesn't give you the opportunity to analyze the data, turn around and provide immediate feedback and remediation to kids if they're struggling in a particular area or if they're ready for additional challenge in an area. So there's a timeline issue with the current MCAS tests. Additionally, because they're locally developed, when the MCAS first came out, after the administration of tests, we would get students' individual score reports, and then they would release the entire test. So we could take an individual student's data. We could see, all right, they missed question 4. We could actually look at what question 4 asked them, and we could analyze, is this a content issue? Is it that they don't understand the language? Is it a vocabulary issue? And we could use that to provide appropriate instruction. But because of the cost of test development and validating new test items, they no longer do that. The MCAS board only releases 50% of the test items. So that puts us at a huge disadvantage. So you're looking with students, and you might have a student that got 4 questions wrong, but you have no capacity to see what the question actually asked, and it's very hard to do anything meaningful instructionally without that data. So that's another issue that we have. We also do have an issue with rigor at the MCAS. The percentage of our students that do very well and score in proficient and advanced on the MCAS in 10th grade is significantly higher than the number of students that show that kind of competency on other assessments like the SAT. So we have a lot of students scoring proficient and advanced on the MCAS and underperforming in terms of the college career readiness standards on the SAT exams. So there's a gap there. So they need to be updated. PARC is a tool that's being tested out across the state right now to be professionally. I'm not sure it's the right fit. We don't have enough data yet to make that determination. So 2 million students just completed the PARC test. In the spring, we will for the first time get actual student score reports back. Parents will get a comprehensive score report. Parents at that point will have the opportunity, at least parents that have had MCAS experience, to see whether this provides richer data. Does it help you understand your student's learning profile better, what their instructional needs are? PARC, the turnaround, because it's an online assessment, the data will be back much more quickly. There are many things that are going on across the state right now. With the full support of the Mass Superintendents Association, Governor Baker has developed a process. There's going to be an completely independent review of the PARC exam, and he's assigned a committee to work on that. There'll be public forums held across the state in June where parents and educators and anybody who wants to participate in that dialogue and discussion can go and share their perspectives. and have their voices heard. Additionally, once we get the first round of data, we actually will be able to compare how did students score on Park and what is that compared to how they did on the MCAS. We can look at our students that are taking SATs and see is Park a closer measure and predictor of how students will do in some of those other national NAEP and the NAEP exams as well. So we'll have a much wider data set at that point to make an informed decision. The Board of Ed won't be determining or voting on Park until the fall of next year. And again, professionally, I can't weigh in until I have all the data available. We know there's limits to the MCAS tests. I don't think it's gives us the kind of information we really need moving forward to really design appropriate instruction for kids or to assess our curriculum. Whether revising that and independently and developing a new MCAS is the right answer, or whether the Park is going to meet our needs, we'll be better able to assess once we have all the data back.
What I would add too is we spent a lot of time last year, whether it was through school committee meetings, whether it was through administrator meetings, or attending superintendent meetings around the state, debating, what the next King Philip steps would be with regards to the Park assessment. Some of the questions that were brought up at a superintendent's conference that was attended by many superintendents across the state was simply, is there another test that's waiting in the wings that's undergoing development? The response at that time was, no, there's no other test undergoing development. One of the things that as I said, we started this conversation last year in October. We continued to review what was on the landscape, and there was different information, new information that was presented, whether it was weekly or monthly with updates from the Department of Education. One of the things that we took note of, we did participate in the pilot testing last spring at King Philip. It was computerized, and so as we were looking at the next directions, what we were looking at because of the age of the students was should this assessment somehow become a graduation requirement. We really don't have many years to get there when you're dealing with 7th and 8th grade level. The other issue that was on the horizon also was that we really wanted to understand better if our students were comfortable with the computerized based testing. We wanted to ensure that our teachers also were comfortable with computerized testing. This is what the state calls a hold harmless year, in the sense that it gives everybody a second opportunity. We participated in a very small scale version of the Park. It gives everybody a second opportunity to take a look at this test. So it's, as Ingrid said, I think that, you don't know about it until you really look at it closely. The practice tests are available for people to take online. We made that available to all of our parents. The other thing that we've been looking into actively is that, there are probably about 80% of schools across the country in higher education that are still requiring the SAT and the ACT as part of their admissions requirements. The ACT website, if you look at it, it indicates the revisions to the new ACT test have been aligned with the Common Core. If you look at the new redesign of the SAT, which will start, it will start being administered to students in actually next spring, in spring of 2016. That has also been aligned. Ed Week did a piece last year that compared the Common Core standards with what the new SAT is expected to look like. There'll also be a computerized testing option for the students. And so, what we were looking at is, okay, here we are at the secondary level. College is coming. We want our kids to remain competitive. We don't know ultimately what the State Board of Education will decide. I actually did call someone, and because I know that it is important to hear every voice in the community, no matter how big or how small. The numbers of students that actually, parents actually requested that they not take the park test, we did honor. It was very, very small. There was a very small percentage. And I would say less than 3%. So less than 3%, okay? So we're trying to look at, one of the things that just came out was a comparative. It was published in February of 2015, and I have a press release of that. I think Ingrid may have a copy of the total report. We tried to make sure that people had all the factual information in case they wanted to reflect on it here. But what that committee did was the committee. It was put forth, the document is called Educating Students for Success, and what they did was they compared the park to the MCAS. What they did was they attempted also to, they also, at the end of the document, say they're moving ahead cautiously. We're going to need to look at the park data. Massachusetts is going to have to look at, how the strength of the results, comes back. One of the things that I will say is if you look at the test history of the MCAS, when the MCAS first started out, and I think too when the standards first started out in Massachusetts, they started out, they had their beginnings, the ELA and the math scores initially in that first year where MCAS actually did count, not cited pilots or whatever, the scores initially were quite low. And then over a period of years, there was that iteration, and eventually with No Child Left Behind and the accountability, the State Department said, okay, it's time to, really take a look at the MCAS, shift our focus in terms of accountability. So I think, there's always that place for, that place for wanting to improve, wanting to be better, looking at the data, what the data is telling us about instructional practices and how we need to move forward. So, we, with the park, we're moving forward cautiously. I will say we're almost done with our second week, week of the park test. We have 7th and 8th graders. Ultimately, it's gone very smoothly. The first day, I will tell you, we had a fire drill with a toaster, we did have some login problems, which are expected because we'd never really tested at the same time, such a large grouping of students. But, it has not really required any additional expense on the middle school's part, in terms of technology or the hardware. But what we are looking at is, can we use what we're using wisely, and can we be prepared for things that may be to come. Okay.
At the elementary school last year, we did pilot the park assessment in 4th grade. The state had selected randomly grades to pilot so that they would have some data. We did pilot at the 4th grade. We wanted to be part of shaping the assessment and having a role in providing feedback to the Department of Ed. So we piloted, 2 4th grade classes were selected to pilot the park assessment. We did send letters home to all the parents of families in those classes explaining the park and that it was a part of a pilot, but we had full participation. We didn't have anybody opt out of the pilot. No. Anything else?
I think, does the committee have any questions right now?
Yes, go ahead.
The question that's before us isn't to weigh the pros and cons of this program. The question for us is a ballot question. Have you had, and I know 2 weeks ago, we had folks here that were very impassioned with different views. And we're not here to judge the right or wrong of either view. What we are here is to reflect whether or not this merits going on the ballot without the proper process, which is a petition. Have you had a lot of folks bring this to your attention as a concern?
We have not at the elementary level.
We have not at the middle school. I have a very, one or two people that have discussed it.
One
but
or
that's
two?
it. That's it.
And you haven't had?
I've spoken with Mr. Tui a couple of times on different occasions regarding the Common
The
Core.
parents, students in our schools, have you had?
I have not had a very small number.
Without getting into significant debate, because that's not the intention, but, to a layperson, the answer is, clearly, it's not obvious in terms of what the best course of action is. Having said that, I think there are a fair number of concerns out there, valid concerns, and I would venture to say that you share some of those concerns. It's just a matter, you're weighing the pros and cons here, but could you share some of your concerns as far as moving forward and what the pitfalls might be over time?
With the park assessment?
Or Common Core, park assessment. I mean, at one point you said they're not necessarily the same, but
Right.
Folks are kind of viewing those as part and parcel with.
People are seeing them as linked, yeah. The Common Core is more the standards, and the park would be a possible tool for measuring progress towards those. So I think that some of the concerns across the state regarding park are the technology required to implement that assessment as an online assessment. There are certainly many districts across the Commonwealth that do not have the technology that we have in our schools. And that's a challenge for them as to how do they bring that technology in and how do they fund that. And there's always technology replacement to keep current. So there's a cost there that's a concern. Although whether we go with park or if there's a revised MCAS, very likely there'll be components of a revised MCAS that will be online too. So that's an issue that may be out there regardless of what direction we go. Again, I think with the park, it's the first administration. We have some concerns about how kids are going to do on an online test. So when you're measuring writing, there's a keyboard requirement in terms of how they express their understanding that way. The reality is in college, kids are expected to type papers and submit them and respond to, web dialogue and things like that. So we know that's coming. But we want to really see, I would like to see the students' results and how they compare to MCAS and whether that impacted their ability to express themselves in writing. We want to really see how valid the items are and whether they give us good data. I guess that's where my caution is in terms of the park assessment. We don't have enough data yet to look at. Does it really measure what we're intending to measure? Does it give us good instructional information? That being said, as I mentioned earlier, we know that the current MCAS test is not sufficient. So we have to move forward in a different direction, whether it's revised MCAS or park. And until we have all the data back, I don't think anyone can make a truly informed decision. But we will have that in the spring. And then I do think there is a very public, open process for parents and citizens to contribute to that. And again, I believe that the schools, we intend to be part of that dialogue, but I can't take a position until I have a chance
It's
to
really
see and
looking
look
at
at
the
all of the
data.
data.
Yeah.
And part of the park assessment also is student surveys. So we'll have information from students about how they felt about taking an online assessment. And so there's a lot of student survey questions that'll also be good data for us to look at in making that decision.
How about Common Core?
Common Core, as I mentioned earlier, I believe the Common Core standards are developmentally appropriate for our kids, and I believe that they're the floor. And I think best practice instructionally, we always challenge students. We've spent a lot of time in Norfolk looking at Bloom's taxonomy and developing lessons that are engaging and that have sufficient rigor. I think that's best practice in education. Of course, there's some parts of the standards that you may like and not like, but I do think the emphasis on nonfiction writing and critical reading of nonfiction texts is really valuable and an important skill for our students to have. I have a copy here if you want to take it of a document that's on the Department of Ed website. This is just a sample of a piece of it that compares the mass frameworks with the Common Core. So you can see exactly where they're aligned and where their differences, if you want to take. This is just a sample.
Thank you.
But there's a significant amount of overlap, and I think you'll see that in the document.
Dr. Laurie,
But
some
I
of the
do
other.
think we're going to have to revisit the standards again. I mean, any good curriculum cycle, you always go back and revisit.
That's
So they'll
correct.
be revisited and revised again in a logical process.
You know, one of the things that, I think we've all read about is the concern about textbooks, how, as more and more states adopt, these standards and such, that if a state either didn't go along or perhaps decided they wanted to change course, that now it's going to get increasingly difficult, expensive, what have you, to move away from.
Well, I think the textbook argument, my perspective on that would be Massachusetts has always had, prior to 2010, our own state standards. Textbook companies have always written their textbooks and produced their materials based on Texas and Florida. They're the two largest markets. So textbook companies have always been driven by the standards of those two states because it's their vastest market. And then they backwards align and say, here's where this text aligns with the mass standards. Textbooks are just resources. They're never a full curriculum. So we take a look and we may use pieces of a textbook. We develop our own materials and supplement. So we develop our curriculum, and textbooks are a tool. But there isn't a textbook that exists that's ever been written for the math frameworks, except for the third grade Massachusetts history text. But other, Pearson, all the big publishers have always targeted Florida and Texas, the bigger markets. And their standards were significantly lower, so they've been elevated a little bit by the Common Core. But no textbook is going to be a curriculum or a program. We have to customize, we have to look at where they're strong. We get testing data, we look at where we have to supplement. So I'm not sure what the impact would be, but I don't see it as having a major financial impact. If Massachusetts withdrew, it would be where we were a few years ago. You still are customizing your materials to fit the curriculum that you're developing.
And in a way, the
sorry.
conversations were totally valid points and conversation, and I'm sure we're going to have some other ones here this evening. We had some a few weeks ago. Those are all details, really, at the
Right.
end of the day. I'm sure what you want and really what your goal is, I'm sure every day as you approach your work, is that you're trying to develop kids for success in the future.
Absolutely.
To compete globally, et cetera. It's increasingly challenging out there, as I think most of us know. So just to circle back on that, because really that's the underlying point, the underlying objective, which I'm sure we're all in agreement, everyone in this room, that that's what we're trying to achieve. And so it's fair to say that you believe that this shift away from MCAS in favor of Common Core and perhaps Park, if they go part and parcel, or I'm not sure if they can be separated, but that is consistent with that underlying objective, preparing these
Students for
children
long-term
for success
Yeah, I think that's
in
accurate.
the years ahead. So
And again, I think the Common Core is a set of learning standards and expectations. Park is just one potential tool to measure that. And where I feel that the Common Core has made some positive changes, again, I'm not committed to whether or not Park is going to be a good tool. We just don't have enough information to
Right.
determine that at this stage, I think. But we will be looking at a next generation new assessment in the next 5 years, whether it's Park or MCAS, because we know there are limitations to the current assessment.
well, when there's differing points of view, I like to emphasize the things that we
Yeah.
all agree on and the objectives that I'm sure we all have, and I think that's certainly the one.
I would also say too, and if you like this information, we can leave it with you. The Massachusetts Board of Elementary and Secondary Education is going to be the responsible board that's going to need to vote and make this decision on Park in November. They're also going to be responsible for setting up forums around the state. So if there are people that really want to have their voices heard, I would encourage them to dialogue with and
Absolutely.
participate with the Massachusetts Board of Secondary and Elementary Education.
Before I open it up, Jim, do you have other?
I think I will, but not right this moment, if folks want to
Okay.
contribute.
You need a microphone and state your name and address? No, Pat, no, excuse me.
For the cable.
We have a cable. Everyone has to have to make sure it's on. It's not for us here. We can hopefully all hear.
Patrick Tui, 12 Applewood Road. I just want to correct you a little bit. Park and Common Core are privately owned, and they are copywritten by Achieve Inc. You know that?
Yeah.
There is no mechanism for update through the state level, any state level.
Well,
Massachusetts follows the Massachusetts frameworks.
right.
And
When
so,
but when Common Core and Park are settled in, there is no mechanism for update or input from parents or teachers. It is copywritten. The standards are set in stone. As said by Dr. Sandra Stotsky, who was on the validation committee, and refused to sign off on them with Dr. James Milgram, who were the only content standards on the validation committee in 2008. And Massachusetts signed on them before they saw them. There was no public debate for these Common Core standards. No matter what Mitchell Chester tells you, there was no. If they had a debate, it was one day at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, and they announced it the Friday before. There was no public debate for Common Core standards before they were implemented in 2010.
I would disagree. The Department of
Please
Ed.
prove that to me.
You can go on the Department of Ed website and you can see the public comment period and the
Patrick, you guys
surveys that were sent out.
that would be something that, if you do have a dispute with that should go to the board,
Yeah, to the public forums.
to the public forums also.
As far as, I'm sorry, Les. Yes, I do think that's going to be an excellent venue for people to communicate and share their thoughts regarding the Common Core. But in terms of revision, the Department of Ed, any standards that are adopted, we know we're going to be reviewing and revisiting and revising. The Mass Department of Ed could choose to develop their own college and career readiness
Right.
standards and replace those and revise those documents. They don't have to retain the Common Core. They do have that
With each
option.
standard development, there has been a
Right.
body of people that has been a part of the process. So as people that have watched the process in Massachusetts, I would assume that process would continue. The Common Core is part of the frameworks. It is not the whole frameworks. And essentially, you have a body of people that looked at that and said, that they would adopt them and incorporate them, and that they were better than the original ones under development with the Massachusetts frameworks.
Yes. Do you have the mic? Thank you.
Well, so I'm not really firmly in one camp or
Can
another.
you first identify yourself?
Oh, sure. I am Kim Eldred. I live in town. I have a third grader and a sixth grader. I also work in higher education, so I see some of the spectrum of what has been happening. My biggest concern with the implementation of the Common Core or the shift in education, and it's been centered around what we've talked about tonight, is data, data, data. My children take more tests than they have ever taken, and they do more test prep than they have ever done. And I've complained about it for years, and I understand the full cycle of it, that we need to do well on these assessments because it impacts us in the community. We want our children to achieve well. I'm concerned that as we examine all of these tests, we're losing sight of the education and the opportunity to educate kids in different ways, because tests are limiting. And I can speak from personal experience. I did not do well on my SAT, but I'm bright enough, I guess, to have gone on and gotten a master's and teach at the college level. So that we are limiting our kids. We're using these assessments to place our kids in different ways, and I'm concerned that we are focused on assessment, whatever that assessment may be, far more than we're worried about curriculum. And I'd like it to be on the ballot so we can have this conversation, because I think it's an important conversation. I don't know where I will fall out in all of this, but it would be nice to educate people and have the opportunity to talk about it a little further. So I see at the college level, I will tell you, I teach freshmen at Northeastern, and I teach a career class. They are excellent test takers, but I don't teach a class that has a single test in it. I have a portfolio project, and when I give them that project, they look at me stunned because they don't know how to do that. They've been taught in a box how to test very, very well. They did great. They got into Northeastern. They're business students. They're very successful. But they have trouble thinking critically. And these tests are not helping our kids think critically. I do not think that we are teaching that by bringing home these preparation assignments. I also know that from the employer perspective, because I work in co-op, I never hear the employer say, our students are not ready because they don't know how to do the work. I hear they're not ready because they're not mature, they don't show up on time, they answer their cell phones. So I don't think we have academically shortchanged any of our students. And just pursuing this course with more testing and more testing and more data is not helping the educational process. So that's where I'd like to see it on the ballot if possible.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Michael Iantosca, 16 Applewood Road. I have two daughters, one 9 and one 12. And I just have a simple question. I'm not sure if this can be answered tonight, but do we know how much implementing Park will cost the town if we decide to go forward? And also, if we decide to go forward with Park, do we lose local control over the standard?
At this point, I would not say that Park has really cost anything from the, from the hardware perspective. And I think that's a big, that was a big question or concern that comes from different pockets around the state. We use all the labs and all the devices that we have in the building for educational purpose. They're used quite frequently. So from that perspective, no. What I think, what I think that we're going to have to take a look at, and as I said, I don't know what the State Board of Ed is going to decide in November. I think any time that you implement, anything new, there is, there's a training piece and, a training curve for teachers, in terms of professional development. There is, there needs to be opportunities that, in general, as we look at computerized testing, which is going to be, a part of high school and beyond as we move forward for our students. And I think that, there is a, there's a time element that goes with the instruction of that. Do you have anything you want to add
No, I
to
would
that?
say the same thing. And from a technology perspective, we have the tools and resources in Norfolk. That's not true of every district around the Commonwealth. But in Norfolk, we have the equipment that we would need to administer an online assessment. So there's not a hardware cost for us, but there is a time cost in terms of training staff and the technology team setting up the equipment to be ready. So there is a time element and a professional development requirement for that. In terms of the standards, again, Park does not drive the standards. Park's an assessment measure. So the standards were adopted in 2010 and are in place. So whether Park is the measure or a different MCAS is the measure, that's separate from what standards are and what's in place.
Right, and I think, the other pieces too, there is that indication in Massachusetts that the current MCAS is not what we need. And so regardless of whether it's Park or something else that's new, unless the view of, of no standardized assessment needed is taken, I think it boils down to time and hardware.
Hi, I'm Tracy Malloy. I live on Strawberry Lane and have 2 children in the school system. I just had a follow-up on the question with the technology. We said we didn't have to buy any more, but how much time is the technology being taken away from the students to prep for Park and during Park, and where does that
This is
come into play?
I think how I would explain it, and Dr. Lardy can add to that as well. We shouldn't be just preparing to take a test. It should be learning that's all embedded throughout instruction over the course of the year. So truly If the frameworks does have, and it does, has the Common Core represented as part of the frameworks, we have looked at ways, across Norfolk, across Massachusetts, so that these standards are a part of everyday practice in terms of what is being taught in the classroom. On our website, as I mentioned, the curriculum is posted in terms of, units of instruction, maps of what you might see throughout a time period in a course. Are there some, when a test is new, is there a need for looking at a practice test and seeing what it looks like? Absolutely there is. Because as we, with any new thing that our children encounter, with any new thing that we encounter, it is something new. We don't want anybody to go into it and feel stressed. We want everybody to go in feeling as comfortable as they can about the situation.
I just want to clarify, was your question about when we're administering the test, that technology is not available?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was under the impression that the technology, that all the technology used, the hardware used for the testing became unavailable several weeks before the test started. And then there's 2 rounds of tests, so that would be several weeks, 2 different times where there's no technology.
As this was our first time that the test was given, it wasn't several weeks. It was 1 week before the testing period started. Okay. What I will tell you, though, is that we do, as our labs are being used, we have also mobile carts that are a part of our classroom practices. As our labs are being used and used frequently, there are times when they're in high demand.
Jennifer Dyer, Quail Run Road in Norfolk. And again, I'd like to encourage this to be on the ballot. Just the fact that we are just now holding forums across the state to get feedback, it's a little late. Why wasn't that done when this was all coming out back in 2009, 2010 for parents? They say there was public comment and feedback from parents. I have been at this for 3 years, and I have not met one parent whose feedback was sought, whose opinion was heard, who was informed. Anytime I brought up Common Core with people, they had never heard of it. So I find it very hard to believe that there was adequate information given to the people of our town as this was being implemented in Norfolk schools for people to have had their say. So I think just the fact that we're now going back and having forums across the state, which I applaud the governor for doing, because he is trying to make up, I guess, for lost time. But it's a reason why it should be on our ballot, that not enough people in our town are aware of it. You may have not even heard from parents. You say you have heard from very few people because they don't know what happened. We had the best standards in the world, in the country, and nobody really knew that Common Core was implemented. It just kind of happened, So it really needs to be on the ballot. And I also want to say, for the people who are against Common Core are not against having standards. We just want the highest standards possible. And maybe the Mass State frameworks needed some improvement, but they were the best in the country. And the rest of whoever came up with Common Core needed Massachusetts to go along with it. In order, if Massachusetts is going to do it, it must be okay. So there just was not enough dialogue. We're not against having standards. We just want them to be high standards, the best standards, which is what we had. I feel like our children are being exposed to a giant experiment that is unnecessary, because I don't know about anybody else, but were you sitting around thinking, gee, our standards really are in the tank. Our kids aren't doing well. Like, did anybody come to you as the principal or the superintendent, or, sorry, I don't know exactly what your titles are, and say, I'm not happy with the standards we have? This should be coming up from the local level, from parents, with their involvement, and it was just not done. And I think a lot of parents would like to be involved in that discussion, and be informed, and know that these changes are taking place. I just don't think they know. I don't think people knew they could opt out of that test, which is why the opt-out rate was so low. Or they might fear, like, what happens if I don't take it? So those are kind of my comments. And again, I just really would support putting it on the ballot so people can really know that, gee, this is something that we should be paying attention to, and do a little more research and find out, what the pros and cons are of it. We all want good, high standards for our kids. It's just kind of the process that it had taken that is not very palatable. So, thank you. I hope you'll vote to put it on the ballot.
Jan, or my question then on the whole ballot issue then, why do you think people, sadly, when people come to the polls to vote, why do you think they're going to be informed and even because Pat's, it's on the warrant, so we're going to debate this for as long as people want at town meeting, which is probably great for them. But when they come to the ballot, what if you said they didn't even, they haven't even complained to the school system yet? Why do we believe they're going to read this when it's on the ballot? I guess I'm concerned about that.
Can I comment on that?
Let me finish.
Let me offer a vote.
Yeah, what I mean, and then, the fact that, again, I think parents might be afraid to talk to schools, but I still haven't heard, in order to be on the ballot, obviously Patrick has the right, and you guys have the right to get 10% of the citizens to be behind this. I don't see that even meeting that minimum threshold of 10% of the people that, are concerned about this, maybe because they don't know, and is the ballot the way to educate them? The concern I think I have as a selectman is putting things on the ballot that aren't, I think there are, they need to be debated, need to be talked about. I myself haven't heard enough to say that it's a concern, it's a concern shared by many people, which I believe it is, but they have, they could either sign the petition to put it on the ballot, which is the 600. Right, so you're well on your way.
Well,
There should be concern for that, right? That concerns me, there's not concern that it's not being signed. Do you follow me?
I get what you're saying, but if it's in there, somebody's going to say, or do you have a history of people not reading the town warrant?
Oh, no, the town warrant to read. The ballot, they come in, just check boxes.
There are different processes. First, I think there's a very valid issue of communicating more about this issue, no question. And we have to find ways to create the right forums to do that. That's one of the reasons I'm grateful for you folks coming tonight. We're not on the school committee. I'm beginning to think I'm back on the school committee after this evening. But, we don't have a vote other than as a citizen in that process. The reason we did this, and Patrick, the reason we had you last time was to create a forum, because hopefully there are people watching where this helps precipitate that kind of dialogue. That's a good thing. The issue is how best to do that. And I'm torn on it as well. The warrant goes out to every household, every single household in the town, and you're already on the warrant. So the issue will be before every household on the warrant. And that's a good thing. You got the petition in. It required, I think, only 10 signatures, if I remember. But the point is it's there, and it will facilitate a debate at town floor. That's a good thing. But we only get 200 people at town meeting. That's a bad thing. So how do we facilitate greater discussion? And I know there's this perception that getting it on the ballot might do that, but the reality is it doesn't. There's no preemptive information about a ballot question. We don't send out a warrant about a ballot. Nothing goes out to the household explaining the questions when it's a town election. So people are going to go to the ballot, and they're going to see a question that, unless they've watched this or gone to some other forum or have some vested interest in this, are going to have no idea what that's about. So my question is there a better way to do it? Because I think the issue is valid. This discussion is a healthy, and I know these folks are all for it. I mean, nobody is against having the dialogue. The reason that it requires 10% of the registered voters to go on a ballot is that anything that goes on a ballot where the community is going to voice an opinion should reflect a fair amount of folks who have that as an issue to be voted on. So therefore, the threshold of 10% was put there, so that you need to get 600 signatures. Otherwise, everyone has various interests and desires and views on different things. You could have 100 ballot questions that are somewhat meaningless to people because they happen to have a passion over that particular issue. Valid as it may be, there needs to be a process that reflects a lot of people. That's why the 10%'s there. So I'm kind of stuck on both sides of this. I see the reason why you want it, but I don't know how it helps, because it will be an uninformed vote. Whereas if we can create some more forums of this nature, where we can, and the warrant will do that. The warrant goes to the House. The warrant will facilitate a dialogue. And we may find that 500 people show up at town meeting, which would be wonderful. I mean, that would be great. And if this brings them in, terrific. You know, spaghetti, whatever it takes to get people in, we want people at that meeting. And if from that dialogue there is a concern, then it should go on the warrant.
I mean, the ballot.
Yeah.
One of
Excuse me,
the,
go on the ballot. Grab the microphone.
Again, for people at home,
It's not
Patrick.
for us, but, yeah, it's not for us.
Louis Applewood Road. The ballot question is directed towards the state.
I understand.
The warrant is directed towards King Philip and Norfolk school systems. Okay? If we get it on the ballot, there will be a campaign in town and people will know what that ballot question is.
But the ballot question, if it comes from the town of Norfolk, should reflect the concerns of the citizens of Norfolk. That's why the 10% requirement's there, Patrick.
Understood.
That's
And
the reason
if I had
for the
more
10%.
time, I would have got the 700 signatures needed.
But you're asking 3 people to step in as the voice of 600 people. And we're not hearing 600 people say that it's a concern. That's the issue I have.
I have a question. Carla Costa, 17 Willow Place, and I have an 8th grader and a 10th grader. And I have a question, because I run across parents that they have no idea, they don't know what Common Core is, they don't even know why their child's taking part, they don't really know what it is. And then I've told some, I opted my daughter out, and they don't know why, like, oh, you did, I didn't know we could do that. So I don't understand why it's almost like it's not, like parents aren't getting the information, like, oh, your child doesn't have to take this test. Like, why is it all just assumed? I think a lot of people just think like, oh, it's just the way it is, and they're just going to go along with it because they don't even know they have an option. So I just think that the more it's, if we could somehow get the information out, that people just need to be more informed about it before they just had their, send their child to school.
I agree.
They're just assuming it's the way that's the way it is.
I couldn't agree more. The
Yeah.
question is, what's the right forum to do that?
Right.
And certainly the warrant article in town meeting is one, but a lot of this, I think, falls back to the schools on how they can better communicate it, or maybe they have and it's not
that would be
understood.
something that I would actually be open to feedback.
Please don't interrupt. Yeah,
Yep.
go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is with every new curriculum that we've adopted, so we adopted a new math curriculum, we've had parent evenings. We have gone over what the curriculum is. We did a comparison for parents of how the new Common Core is embedded in the new math curriculum. We showed the difference explicitly, and that PowerPoint is available for anybody who wants it, but compared the Common Core to the current and where the changes were and what that curriculum looked like. We had probably 100 parents there for the math night. We do regular communications. We send out surveys for parent comment and for parent input. If there's other avenues that we could take that would help give a broader voice, we'd be very interested in that. We don't have, 100 parents. We have 1,000 students, so 100 parents came and got the information. So if you have suggestions for better ways to craft that dialogue we always send out notices, we send out emails, we announce when the curriculum nights are. We do have a pretty good attendance, but it's certainly not representative of everybody. So we've tried different ways. I know the H. Olive Day is doing an open town meeting to talk about curriculum issues and respond to questions. We've tried a lot of different forums, but if there's a way that you think we could better reach parents, we're very open to that, to have the dialogue, to have the conversations. We want parents to be informed too. We also, I think, share your goal. We want the best, most rigorous programs for our kids. We want kids to be well prepared. You talked a little bit about the assessment, being cautious about what we're assessing and when and how much testing and making sure we're getting meaningful data. All of those are good dialogues, and I think the more informed parents are, the better off we all are. We're all partners. So if there's another avenue for those dialogues or for people to get information, we're very open to that. Typically, again, for our curriculum nights, we have about 100, maybe 120 parents, and we do recognize that people have childcare issues, people have sports and other commitments. One of the things that we're trying to do now is that when we have those nights, we're videoing and archiving them so people can watch them at a different time. So we're very open to suggestions in terms of ways to make the communication stronger.
We've done similar things through our presentation. Our park conversation was ongoing from October of last year all the way through June. We had to make that decision. We've publicized things through our Connect Ed, our email out to parents. So we've done very similar things to get word out to people.
I just think I just don't think
Yeah.
parents were aware that,
Make sure the green light's
It's
on.
for TV.
I just don't think that parents were aware that they could opt out, and I'm wondering, like, why wasn't that communicated? Like, why don't parents know that their child doesn't have to take the test? Just that information, I don't think is out there. I mean, I don't even know if that would come, like, who would make that call, but I just find that interesting.
Hi, I'm Lori Tui. Yeah.
Green light?
Right, too. I'm just wondering, when you piloted Park, did you ever tell the people that the parents that it was going to be tested, or?
Absolutely.
We sent a
It was
letter to every
communicated.
family.
And
Every
that it was a
parent-
pilot?
Every parent received a letter. Every parent, received the communication about that, that was involved in the park testing, yes.
And this year too, or?
Every parent did receive it this year as well. So it was put out several times through the Connect Ed information system.
In the Connect Ed, but it wasn't like a notice that they're doing a
Our,
pilot test, or?
this is not considered by the Department of Education a pilot. Last year was a pilot.
I mean, just one thought, and I'm not sure if this is an option, which is somewhere in the middle here, but, you know, the petition for the ballot is asking the voter to basically say that, you know, vote against, you know, Common Core and revert back to the MCAS standards of pre-2009, what have you. So, I mean, is it possible in a short form to put something that is objective? And when I say that is because I think it is objective to say that, and notwithstanding the correspondence that have gone to parents and such, but just in a general way, I think that this whole program hasn't been communicated as proactively, and this isn't directed at the administration locally, but just in a general sense. I think I shared some of these concerns a few weeks ago, but is it possible to put something to text which makes it clear that there's differences of opinion in terms of what's best for, you know, our students, and that the yes or no is supporting Governor Baker's initiative here to reassess, you know, something like that, which I think people would look at that and say, yeah, maybe it's not a bad idea. Take another look at it. They may not feel strongly one way or the other, but at least it puts it out there as something that people may be that much more cognizant of, that the more they see this as
Well, I can do that. In my presentation 2 weeks ago when I did the history, I mean, the Mass Framework Standards that was commissioned in 1993 went through 2 years of input before it was even thought about being tested. Common Core was developed and implemented within a year. I mean, as educators, is that acceptable to you? I mean, seriously, I mean, I can rewrite the wording
No, I think it's-
that would state that.
It's not the debate on that. It's the debate on, it's still a debate on whether it goes on the ballot.
Yeah, but the question is, what goes on the ballot?
No, because he's already, we have no say
Well,
on
the
that.
question would be, sometimes we can.
This is the
these
warrant.
can be-
Well,
This is the
I mean,
I can resubmit it.
the warrant article that you've submitted, it doesn't facilitate a discussion, it requires a decision. I mean, it reads, "The article is to authorize the town to discontinue the use of Common Core standards and associated testing known as PARC within the Norfolk School and King Philip School Districts." So the article is saying you want it gone. So I'm assuming that you want a ballot question that says you want it gone, because that's in fact what the warrant article says.
Well, they're both non-binding.
But, well, granted, they're not binding, but you're asking the voters to go yea or nay, as opposed to asking the voters to engage in a discussion. And that's a concern to me. I think the issue is we need to engage in a discussion. We need to find a way, because I don't think it's a black and, I know you have very strong views on it, Patrick, but I don't think it's a black and white issue, and I have to respect the information of the professionals that are teaching our kids. There has to be a balance of this dialogue, and I'm hearing you have concerns, you have things you have to work through. How do we facilitate that dialogue to find that, and it may be that you'll never have common ground with some folks, that's life, but, how do we facilitate a dialogue? This doesn't facilitate a dialogue. This creates a yea or nay question. That's the concern I have about a ballot, that is an uninformed voter. And I'm not being disrespectful to the voter. There's, how many people go to the ballot and they see state questions in which information, you have to go on the internet to find out what the heck the question's about. You're lucky if you can understand it. You need a Cliff Note version to understand it, because it's usually 2 pages long, and people make uninformed votes. What we need to have is informed conversations. We need to hear all perspectives of the issues and broader than Norfolk, and seeing if we can't come to the solution, because bottom line is, it's our kids. I share the concern. I've got too many grandkids. I have 7 grandkids in the school system. I share the concern, but I don't want to facilitate the wrong kind of dialogue. I want to facilitate the right kind of dialogue. That's one of the reasons why we gathered this group here tonight. Is we're not decision-making body for this. We could just as easily be sitting out there. In fact, we are.
We're
for all
saying the
intents and
same thing,
purposes.
Jim. I
Pardon?
think that's the point I was trying to make, that this is a yes/no as opposed to supporting in an objective way the reassessment, which I think the governor said he's doing.
That's my concern.
And, something like that, that I think there's enough people that are informed enough to say, yeah, that may be a good idea. They've read some things about it, and they probably have some concerns, and would probably support something like that, supporting, Governor Baker and that initiative. That might be a good idea to do something like that, but as Jim is saying, and the point that I probably didn't express as elegantly as he did, is that, the yes or no is I think, a bit of a stretch, where, especially putting that in a short form on a ballot, it's really a stretch to think that
Other
people are
towns
going
have done it, and it has passed. It has been on the ballots. It's on ballots with 3 other towns right now. Tewksbury voted for it last October. Lakeville did it this past December. 3 other towns are going for it this upcoming May, and more town selectmen are looking at it as the question reads right now.
Mhm.
It's been on town warrants as well in smaller towns. It's hard getting the word out there. But once people get the word out there, they start to question. They start to look at big hits over.
Yeah. Well, again, Patrick, what I'm concerned about, and I would help in any way I can to facilitate, is a dialogue where both parties listen to all sides of the concerns. That's what a dialogue is. A dialogue is not a one-sided debate. It's not, we don't want it, it's no good, get rid of it. We have too much of that going down in a town a little bit south of us, where everything has to be, it's not a black and white issue. So how do we facilitate the conversation? If there's a way,
There is a way.
This
I
is
can
one way.
suggest it right now if you want.
Go ahead.
We can have a forum at the middle school or the high school, which we had last April, Sean duly sponsored, which the school committees were invited and did not show.
Well, we can do it again.
Yeah, and it was competing with many other commitments the night that it was scheduled.
And
So we were
it
both,
wasn't-
I was at another meeting.
Okay, well, it was a month in advance. We did have people from the DESC show up.
Yeah.
We had Dr.
Well,
Sanders.
let's go forward, not backward,
Okay,
Patrick,
we
okay?
can set another one up. I'd be
Okay.
glad to do it. I probably can do it within a month.
I suspect that they'd be welcome to do that. We don't get a vote in it.
So one of my other hats is that I'm one of the co-chairs of the PTO. And while our primary responsibility is fundraising, I am very interested in also helping the community know more. And I think, at the risk of alienating my co-chair, it would be a great thing for us to sponsor a conversation. So if that would be something that people, and I mean a conversation, because you know me, I'm a listener. I need to be on both, I need to hear both sides. I haven't decided, but I think a conversation is good for people to understand so they can hear all aspects. So if that would be helpful, we could try to put something together.
To me, this is making more progress than a ballot question that people will never understand or vote on. This is how we're going to find some common ground in this, Patrick.
Understood. And I understand that, and I have no problem with that. If we could get a forum going with one of the 2 buildings in April, or right before the town meeting, hopefully, and I can arrange some people. We'll invite the DESC. We'll invite both school committees, and we can put them on the stage. We can put them in the audience, and it will be glad.
These are the decision makers, not us.
Yeah, I mean, we can
That's fine. We can certainly can look at
potential
that.
dates and things like that.
Great.
I will follow up with my group, the commoncoreforum.org, and I'll get together with you people, and we'll get together.
That'd be
Thank
great.
you, Brett. Makes sense. Any other
And we've made some progress.
comments, concerns, questions? Jeff or Jim?
Except, thank you very
Well, do
much.
we have
And
to-
Patrick,
yeah,
thank
right,
you
thank
for
you
very much.
coming in and prospecting your views as well. And thank you for seeking common ground. Maybe I shouldn't use that term.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, everybody. Okay.
And Patrick, just as an aside, you don't need us to put it on the ballot, you know that. I mean,
I know, I need about 500
okay.
And it goes to print, I believe, next week.
Well, the town warrant goes to
No,
print.
no, warrant's already, no.
Yeah, the
ballot-
warrant's done. Oh, the ballot's going to? Okay.
Just because there's some people in the audience that might care, there's candidates night is tentatively scheduled for April 15th, so
Tax day.
NCL will be reaching out to people.
Nice job, Mr. Hathaway.
Yeah. What else do we have, gentlemen?
Hold on, I'll put that on here. April
I had
15th.
two
candidate.
brief things. Can we carry on the conversation outside if,
Sorry, thank you. Excuse me?
folks, can we
Ladies?
carry on the meeting, the conversations outside?
Just so we can finish up here?
Thanks.
Appreciate that. Just, thank you. Thank you, Patrick.
So again, I know there's a couple candidates here. NCL has tentatively scheduled the candidates night for April 15th, so.
April 15th?
Yes, so NCL will be reaching out to you.
Is there an advisory board meeting scheduled for that night? That's a Wednesday.
It is a
Yes,
Wednesday.
there is,
Yeah.
yeah. That's Jack's budget, too. You're going to go in front of the advisory.
Sorry?
board.
Tax day, but it's the,
Well, for us, not, for is the advisory board meeting, David, that night?
Yes. Remember, because Jack is going there, because he's going to do his budget. But I know they're trying to find a common date, right? Because, yeah, so.
they didn't want to do, there was a lot, not just me, but there was a lot of concern that it was, the last week in April was too close to
Oh,
the election.
absolutely.
The week before that is school vacation week, and then NCL has at least one other commitment on that week before that, so there weren't a whole lot of dates for them to choose from. So I had two minor things. The employees in town, including the school, although a lot of them have left, are participating in the Fitbit Challenge. So we are competing against 6 other communities, folks that are enrolled in our My Health Insurance program who are willing to participate. And both Mary and I are participating. We've got little Fitbit pedometers, if you will, and so we're competing against Franklin and Foxborough and Ipswich and 3 or 4 other towns.
May I just a second?
Yes.
I didn't notice, Mike, that we have a Norfolk King Philip School Committee members here. I apologize.
Thank you for coming. No,
Thank you.
You all, I'm sure, are supportive of that conversation, I hope?
Exactly.
Yeah?
If we can squeeze in April, that would be.
Yeah.
Great, all right,
Thank
nice
you
to see,
both.
thank both for coming. Thank you.
Thank you, that was very, very well done, thank you.
thanks. Oh,
I'm sorry I didn't.
No, I could have, no, I didn't.
So we're going to win.
Oh,
So
wait. So you're running home tonight, Jack. I'm going to push you guys to
Yeah,
the limit.
I
I'm
got-
going to be behind you in the car cheering you on. Go, Mary.
we're trying.
Okay.
How slow does your car go?
It's a Prius.
So when does this end? From when to when?
It's May 4th, so we got. We're just going to dwindle away. You won't even recognize us anymore.
I barely do now without the hair.
Now, can you cheat with those things? Can you like attach them to?
Not that I'm aware of. No, I don't think you can.
Oh, we didn't do
They warned us not to attach them to the dog. So.
I didn't hear that.
There you go, it is
Actually,
cheating.
apparently people have tried that, but dogs are much more sedentary than, they run around for a minute or two, but then that's it. I've got some thoughts, but we're going to follow the rules. So we have 35 people, I think, it ended up being, people participating, so, from town hall, 1 firefighter, and then a lot of school teachers as well.
Great.
Another thing on a much more serious note, King Philip, as is always the case, they're doing good, and they're raising money for some folks who are going through different challenges in life. And sorry, I will have a tough time with this. There are 3 students at KP that are facing cancer challenges.
You want me to read for them, Jeff? No.
Well, no, I'll be all right. Thank you, though. So one event that they're having that I know about is April 15th.
April 15th.
During the day. It's all day, though, so
Okay.
you have time. April 15th at Nicky's. Nicky's Restaurant in Rentham. 10% of their revenues will be going to help.
I know I'm going to
Will
breakfast.
be going to
I know I'm going
KP
to
Cares.
breakfast. Why don't we all go to breakfast?
Yeah, we have to post then.
Absolutely.
We'll post there, breakfast.
I know 2 of the 3 students, and, yeah,
All right.
yeah,
Yep.
I know how you feel.
Keep that. That's great.
So I encourage people, and so KP Cares is a fundraiser is an organization at King Philip that raises money to help out students in need, and
Jeff should know, I think
We'll
his
have to do
daughter started
breakfast,
that.
we'll have to do breakfast,
Really?
lunch, and dinner.
Well, my daughter was involved. It's a young lady from Rentham who actually was the catalyst
yeah,
to put
yeah.
the whole KP.
part of the DECA program,
Yeah.
I imagine.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, Megan Connor,
And we have one here from Norfolk as well.
yeah, good kid.
So I just
2 from Rentham, I guess, and 1 from Norfolk.
I don't know. They're having an internal Red Sox Spirit Day at King Philip for the students, and they'll be having prizes of Red Sox tickets and other events. But that's for the students to participate in during their lunch. If I can get my hands on those tickets, I'll take them. But I think the students will be there. So
Is there anything more we can do to help?
not that I'm aware at this time, but I'm sure there will be more efforts. One of our town hall employees is involved. So. That's it.
Anything else?
What time's breakfast on the 15th?
Oh, set a time, yeah.
Anytime after 6 is good for me.
Earlier the better for me.
Oh, boy. I was thinking like 11. I'm thinking brunch. No, I mean, you guys have
11, I have to be in Fall River at 11. So
You know, Dave?
it's not gonna work.
No, what time you want to do it? You want
What time do you want to go?
Yeah.
I think we should go to
8
your clock, because
Yeah.
obviously we're going to be waiting
No,
for
he
you for
said
a
8.
while.
7, 8 o'clock, 8 o'clock?
Is 8 o'clock
Can you
work?
make it that early?
I can make 8
can you
o'clock.
handle that?
8 o'clock. I'll be there. Dave, you want to join us? All right.
Mary and I are going to walk over.
Yeah, it's not that far. You guys should walk out. It's maybe about 4 miles. I just put 8 a.m.
Jeff and I will tell them to hold the eggs before you get there. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll be there before 8. I'll set the table. Anything
That's
else?
highly unlikely.
Yes. Jack, anything?
No.
Do we have an executive session this evening?
No, we do
No.
not.
We do not.
Okay. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Just
Oh,
one
very
brief
well.
comment, just on the schools. I thought that this was a good, healthy process. I mean, however people get be informed in this. But I visited with both schools, with Ingrid as well as the superintendent over at KP. They are, believe me, they are very open to helping facilitate this dialogue, and I think they've made a good effort to do that. I know people's lives are so busy that sometimes, these things slip by without people knowing. So I think facilitating the dialogue is a good thing. Hopefully we've helped a little bit in that process tonight. I did feel like I was on the school committee again. But I do know in talking with both of them, just the 2 of us, that this wasn't just an afterthought on their part. They're doing everything they can to communicate, and I'm sure that they'll cooperate and facilitate that.
I mean, I see it both in my role here and then as a parent. It's, you see, as much as we try and share information with people, it sometimes doesn't reach
I know.
our intended audience. And then as a parent, I know there's information overload coming
Yep.
in.
Absolutely.
Remember the old backpacks would be forward notices, so you're not sure.
And the good news is the schools are performing very well.
Yeah.
So we don't have an underperforming system. We have a very strong system that is performing exceptionally well and very high ranked in the state. So, one makes, I guess, the sort of the assumption that things will continue. But I'm glad that Patrick brought it up. It's a good dialogue to have. Obviously, he's not alone in the concern. Hopefully, we've been able to facilitate something. That's a good thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a complex subject, and, you know, I've done some reading, but it's not my field, you know.
Yeah, well.
And for every bit of reading you can do,
Education's not my
you can read another article, it just compels you the other way, it makes you think about the other
Well,
side.
I hope that it becomes a dialogue, because, you know, when you become firmly entrenched in a particular view, alternative thinking is sort of difficult.
Can be, yeah.
And for anybody, you know, if that door is black, you're going to have a hard time convincing me it's white, when in fact it's probably gray.
I learned math a certain way, and we probably have concerns about.
I brought a
kids
slide rule out.
learning any other way,
I
and
showed my
teaching
slide rule to
fine.
my kids the other day, and they had no clue what that was. They thought it was a funny-looking ruler.
Yeah, with the sides in the middle, it's awesome. You're doing logarithms.
I think that's the one that really gets folks, is the, you know, the difference in math. It's, you know, not just getting the answer,
How you get
need
the
to
answer.
explain how you got the answer and some of these things, and
I
it's-
can think of 4 or 5 different systems, not only when I was in school, but when I was on the school committee, that math was, they were constantly rethinking how one teaches mathematics.
It's hard, because there's different ways to
And,
teach it, and people learn differently too,
absolutely.
right?
Well, that's the
No?
key, is
That's
that
the key.
people
It's how
learn
people
differently.
And that's never right.
You're never going to find a system that accommodates all
Right,
aspects
yeah,
of that. Some
yeah.
of us are visual learners, some of us are audio, you know, we all learn different ways.
I think that's always a
and,
challenge for the schools.
It's hard, especially in the public system. It's tough. Because you don't have the ability to sort of institutionalize individually tailored programs. Makes it hard. I know when I was on it at KP that we were in the middle of changing the math program when I was on the school committee there. And being a math guy, you know, I was very interested in it. I remember spending a lot of time with, I think Perry Davis was the superintendent at the time. I remember spending many hours with him trying to understand the changes and how it was impacting the kids. And, you know, the biggest question was why? You know, why are we? And I couldn't possibly recite his explanations. They were probably too logical for me to kind of think through. But there are reasons, and his were sound reasons. But they seem to do it all the time with mathematics. I don't know why that
I
is.
think they want everyone to be, it seems like it's a concrete subject, whereas English and language and writing is more subjective. I think that the aspiration is that everyone's about to do the same in math if they're taught, right? Everyone can learn math. Maybe that's not true.
Well,
but-
that's absolutely not true.
No, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
whereas social, if you have, you know, sometimes you have a gift for writing, or just you write at a different ability, you tell stories in a different ability. But I think it goes all the way back, because there's, I don't want to say there's only one right answer, but you generally arrive to an answer, right? It's either the correct answer or not correct. It's that, you know, so I think it frustrates curriculum people, like, why can't, how do we figure out a way so everyone gets math? And then we work around like social studies, science, creative writing, thinking outside the box, which, you know, aren't discrete kind of learning things. But like I said, they haven't figured it out, right? It changes all the time.
I'm glad that we've had this. I'm glad Patrick came in, and I'm glad that these folks, you know, that Susan and Ingrid came in tonight, because it's been sort of a topic that's been out of sight, out of mind for me, and it really shouldn't be. You know, it should be something, I mean, not only just because I have grandkids in there, but it does, you know, the schools are the cornerstone of our community, and
Are they getting it right?
we should have an interest, even if it's not our board of authority. We all have an interest in making sure that our schools remain the best they can be.
we all have teachers that we remember growing up and that have had significant
Indeed we do.
impact on us. And, you know, I think there's an underlying concern that I have is in terms of how much discretion, how much flexibility teachers are going to continue to have, because without that, you wonder if
Yeah.
you know,
Norfolk
you'll-
seems-
teachers
they made me
will
feel
have
good.
those
They made me feel
opportunities
comfortable,
to-
they still do.
Yeah.
No matter what they
inspire,
do, I
you
thought.
know,
I'm glad we
inspire
ended-
children, and I don't know the answer to that.
I don't
It's
either.
just- It's so complicated.
You're gonna adjourn.
I'm glad we ended up where we did, though.
Sorry, Mary.
You know,
Trying.
to have a ballot question that forces people to make a definitive yes or no, when you know that the majority of folks that will show up to vote on that really don't have the knowledge, if you will, to make an informed yes or no. That's the concern I have with the
Well, yeah,
ballot.
and you can't read a ballot question that's written by
One point of view.
one point of view.
Exactly right.
It's usually like
Make
when
an-
Mass does it, they
make
give
an
you the pro and
informed
con, right?
decision.
They give you that little explanation.
That, Jack, I should have said it, you said it perfectly, that ballot question, at least, the warrant article is written with one point of view, one perspective.
Which is fine, because then we can debate it.
You're voting it up or down. You're not,
So at a town meeting, we can at least have a discussion about it.
absolutely, you
ballot
can't
box
have
can't.
that discussion at the
Can't have
ballot.
it.
Right.
Absolutely right.
Right.
You should have said that, we could have ended that all a lot earlier.
We
Jack.
did. I tried. He tried next, and now he's the third guy.
No, I think the way to explain it was like, because Jim alluded to it too, about when Massachusetts puts up like for medical marijuana or not, they put a pro statement and a con statement. That's what the people.
At least there's something, yeah.
Yeah, and you get that little thing from the mail.
If
can
you
read the
vote
long
yes, it
thing.
means this. If you
Yeah.
vote no, it means that. You know,
That's
at least
perfect.
that there are differing
That's
views.
what I think you're trying to
This,
say, is that
this
it's not
article
assured,
is,
but
is a
pro-con.
one perspective view. That's why I went to read it, said, you know, because I
think
thought I
Mary stopped
remembered
taking
it.
minutes.
I did.
Yeah.
Can I get a
Anyway.
motion to adjourn, Lisa?
Oh, you want to go home now?
No, I just want,
Okay.
just so Marion can go home.
The minutes are no longer minutes, they're hours.
Marion's walking home, and it's
It's
dangerous.
I still can't get a motion.
Dangerous enough in the dark.
Not adjourning, just so she can go home. I don't mind.
I move to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for
Aye.
joining us, everyone. We'll be back on, we did change dates, so.
We did. It is the 13th and the 29th.
So April 13th, folks, it's a Monday, so mark your calendar, 7 o'clock, Monday,
And then the
April
29th on the
13th.
Wednesdays.
And then Wednesday, the 29th. We're changing it all up here at Selectmen. Thank you for listening, and have a good evening.